The Space Between Small Things. Chapter 1. There was a second coffee cup in the sink. Leah noticed it before she noticed the silence of the apartment. Owen was sitting near the window with a book open on his lap, though she could tell immediately he had not turned a page in a long time. He asked how her train ride was, and she answered too quickly, both of them pretending the question mattered. The cup remained between them all evening, untouched, ordinary enough to explain and somehow impossible to ignore. She unpacked slowly, not because she had much to unpack. The conference in Prague had lasted only 2 nights, and most of what she carried home was still clean. But the small rituals gave her something to do with her hands. Fold the sweater, hang the coat, place the charger in the drawer beside the bed. Each movement delayed the moment she would have to sit beside him and feel the distance directly. From the living room came the occasional sound of a turning page. Too regular, like someone remembering to perform the idea of reading. Leah stood in the bedroom doorway for a moment and watched him from down the hall. The lamp beside the couch cast a warm circle over his shoulder and left the rest of the apartment in shadow. He looked thinner than he had a week ago, or maybe just tired. There were evenings lately when tiredness had become his entire personality. "You didn't have to stay up," she said finally. Owen glanced toward her. "I wanted to." His smile arrived a second too late. She nodded once and disappeared back into the bedroom before the silence could thicken further. The thing about long relationships, Leah had once told a friend, was that they trained you to notice absence more than presence. In the beginning, love announced itself constantly. Calls in the middle of the night, shared headphones on trains, fingers brushing accidentally and then intentionally. But after 11 years together, intimacy became quieter. You learned the meaning of doors closed softly, half-finished sentences, the particular weight of someone sitting beside you without speaking. And eventually you learned when something had shifted, even if you could not yet name what it was. She changed into an old t-shirt and washed her face in the bathroom sink. The mirror above it had begun to spot near the edges, tiny dark freckles spreading through the glass. Owen kept saying they should replace it. Somehow they never did. When she returned to the kitchen, the second cup was still there. White ceramic, slight crack near the handle. One of theirs, not hidden, not rushed into the dishwasher, just left there carelessly, as though no explanation would be necessary. Leah opened the refrigerator to avoid looking at it directly. There was almost nothing inside except eggs, mustard, and the pasta salad Owen always made when he was anxious. She stared at the bowl for several seconds before closing the door again. "You ate?" she asked. "A little. You should eat more than a little." "I know." The conversation ended there. It struck her suddenly how many of their conversations ended there now. Not with anger, not even with coldness. Just two people arriving at the edge of something and quietly deciding not to continue. Owen set the book down on the couch cushion beside him. "How was Prague? Rainy? That bad?" "No, just gray." He nodded as though this contained useful information. Leah sat across from him in the armchair near the bookshelf. Between them stood the low wooden coffee table they had bought together years ago from a flea market outside Brno during their first summer abroad. Owen had carried it 3 blocks to their apartment because she loved the uneven carving along the edges. Halfway there, they had started laughing so hard they needed to stop and rest against a bakery window. Now the table held unopened mail and a dying plant. Strange, she thought, how objects stayed loyal to old versions of people. "You could have called more," Owen said after a while. There was no accusation in his voice. That almost made it worse. "I was busy." "You used to call when you were busy." Leah looked toward the kitchen sink again before answering. "Did someone come over?" The question entered the room softly. So softly she almost believed she had not asked it aloud. Owen leaned back against the couch. "For work," he said. "Marta stopped by." "Marta?" She needed help with a proposal. "At 8 at night?" "She was nearby." Leah nodded once. Nothing about the explanation sounded impossible. Marta existed. Leah had met her twice. Friendly, sharp, slightly nervous in the way ambitious people often were. The kind of woman who apologized when speaking over someone even by accident. Still, something inside the apartment felt recently disturbed, like air after a door had closed. She drank coffee? Leah asked. Owen looked at her then. Not defensive, not angry, just careful. Yeah. Leah pressed her thumb against the arm of the chair. Okay. The radiator clicked softly in the silence that followed. Outside, rain moved against the windows in thin, uneven lines. Somewhere down on the street, a couple argued briefly in voices too distant to understand. Then came the sound of footsteps disappearing into the wet dark. Owen stood and carried his untouched tea into the kitchen. Leah listened as he rinsed the second cup. Only the second one, not his own. That was the moment she understood the problem was no longer the possibility that something had happened. It was that she had begun observing him like a stranger. And strangers, she thought, always revealed themselves in fragments first. Leah woke before dawn to the sound of Owen moving quietly through the apartment. Not pacing, not restless, just awake. She kept her eyes closed as he crossed the bedroom, pausing near the chair where she had left her coat. A floorboard creaked softly beneath his weight. Then came the careful opening of the wardrobe, the rustle of fabric, the muted click of a drawer closing again. For a moment she thought he might say something. Instead, he left the room. The apartment settled back into silence. Leah stared into the darkness after that, sleep too far away to recover. The digital clock beside the bed read 5:12 in pale green numbers. Rain still touched the windows in faint, irregular taps. She used to love mornings with him. Years ago, before work schedules and postponed conversations and whatever this was now, they would wake slowly on Sundays and stay in bed talking about nothing important. Music, bad neighbors, places they might visit someday. Owen once spent 20 minutes explaining why he believed train stations made people more honest than airports. You can't pretend not to miss someone on a train platform, he had said. At the time, she laughed and kissed his shoulder. Now she wondered when she had stopped remembering things while they were happening and started remembering them only afterward. She found him in the kitchen making coffee. The overhead light was off. Only the small lamp above the stove illuminated the room, turning everything amber and soft around the edges. Owen stood in yesterday's gray sweater, one hand resting against the counter while the kettle warmed. "You're up early," Leah said. He looked mildly surprised to see her. "So are you." She wrapped her arms around herself against the cold. "Couldn't sleep." Owen nodded once, as though this required no explanation. The coffee grinder started suddenly between them, loud in the quiet apartment. Leah watched his hands while he measured the beans. Familiar hands, long fingers, a small scar near his wrist from a broken wine glass years ago. She used to reach for that scar absent-mindedly while they watched television. Now she noticed he no longer wore his wedding ring at home. Not always, just sometimes. This morning, his left hand was bare. "Did you take it off for work?" she asked before she could stop herself. Owen glanced down at his hand. "Oh." He rubbed his thumb lightly against the empty place. "I left it near the sink." Leah said nothing. Another small thing. Explainable. That was becoming the exhausting part. Nothing was large enough to confront. Nothing certain enough to accuse. The unease survived precisely because it could still be dismissed. The kettle clicked off. Owen poured water slowly through the coffee grounds while steam rose between them. The smell filled the kitchen almost immediately, dark and comforting. For one brief second it reminded Leah of winter mornings in their first apartment, when they had almost no furniture and drank coffee sitting cross-legged on the floor. Back then, struggle had felt temporary. Now even comfort seemed fragile. "I talked to Hannah yesterday," Leah said. She asked if we're still coming to dinner Friday. Owen handed her a mug before answering. "Are we?" "I don't know." He leaned back lightly against the counter. "You don't want to go?" "It's not that." Hannah was the kind of friend who noticed things too quickly. During their last dinner together, she had asked Leah 3 separate times if she was tired. By dessert, Owen had become so quiet even Hannah's husband started overcompensating with stories no one fully listened to. Leah could not bear another evening of being gently observed. She'll ask questions, Leah said finally. Owen looked at her over the rim of his mug. About what? There it was again. That careful tone. Not denial. Not irritation. Something softer and stranger. Like a person trying not to frighten an injured animal. Leah stared down into her coffee. Nothing. Outside, the sky had begun turning from black to deep blue. Across the street, lights flickered on one apartment at a time. A woman in a red coat walked quickly beneath an umbrella, disappearing behind the tram stop. Owen cleared his throat quietly. Marta got promoted, he said. Leah looked up. She found out yesterday. It took her a second to understand why he was telling her this now. She came over to celebrate. The explanation arrived too late to feel natural. Leah held the warm mug between both hands. You don't need to keep explaining. I'm not. A pause. Then, more honestly, I think maybe I am. The room became very still after that. Owen looked tired again. Not guilty exactly. Just worn down by something he could not organize into words. Leah suddenly remembered a night from years earlier, shortly after they married. The electricity had failed during a storm, and they sat awake under blankets listening to rain in complete darkness. Owen had reached for her hand then and said very quietly, I never want us to become people who stop saying what they mean. At the time it had sounded simple. Now it felt impossible. Do you still love me? She asked. The question startled both of them. Owen's face changed almost imperceptibly. His eyes lowered first, then returned to her. Yes, he said. Not immediate. Not delayed either. Careful. Leah realized then that there were many ways to tell the truth, and some of them hurt more than lies. The radiator clicked again behind them. Somewhere in the apartment, Owen's phone vibrated once against the wooden table in the living room. Neither of them moved toward it.